Where's that darn karate Jew? They're making us rabbinists look horrible.
If you've enjoyed this program, please click like and subscribe.
Shalom, and welcome again to another exciting edition of the Torah Watchman Show, LLC. Just recently registered as a genuine 501c3 non-for-profit company out of the state of Maryland. Do you know what that means? For ben-Emmett here, your humble host, it means that you can come to my company through a PayPal link I'm going to provide. If you're in the United States, if you want to give a tax-deductible deduction to charities around the world, I know where the most vulnerable Jews are located. Not just Jews, but b'nai Noah too. People struggling to leave paganism behind them. For the one true God of Israel, it sounds so beautifully sweet. Yes, ben-Emmett here to present to you another deliciously sweet Torah Parshah. And we're talking about the Parshah bowl, which essentially is talking about the last 3 plagues of Egypt. We visited the first 7 plagues last week, and now we're going to wrap it up in the last 3. The last 3 plagues are the ones that will turn that heart of stone and ice of Pharaoh. When Moshe and Aaron go to him, he says, "Let my people go." He'll say, "Get out of here." That's what we're talking about. I did a video not long ago. It's a documentary, like a lecture format, that provides you 10 indelible, non-controversial at all, based on facts and archaeological discoveries and evidence, some just very current with the last few years or so, that shows you that the story I'm going to be talking about during this Parshah, this video, and the ones for the last few weeks in the book of Shemos and Exodus are genuine, sincerely true, and emet from God's own penmanship through his humble servant Moshe. So let's get started. So the last 3 plagues, let's list them. We're talking about locusts, we're talking about darkness, and we're talking about the death of the firstborn. These are very, very important because they fall in sequential order. It's like a climax of a great movie or story in a book, a cliffhanger scene. You know, you've been waiting, or something that's going on for weeks or months, or a series or something. There's a few movies like that on TV that you just cannot wait until the next month or next week when it comes out. This is what I'm talking about. The stage is set and the climax is here, and we're going to talk about the last 3 plagues that really gripped the soul of Egypt and turned them around. Moshe commanded the Israelites concerning the pakal offering and the laws of Seder. Some very, very important, critically important mitzvot are detailed throughout this Parshah, and we will slow down a little bit and provide more detail. I've broken this out traditionally in 7 aliyahs. Essentially, that means that we have like chapter breakouts, sections there that we traditionally come to the bima, where the Torah is laid out and taken out of the ark. We say a blessing. We kiss the sidra, what's going to be read. And then the portion and sectional breakouts here are known as aliyah for anyone who is not Jewish and has never been in a synagogue before. Every synagogue is different. Haredi synagogues are a lot different than Orthodox synagogues. It's not germane to get into all those detailed differences, but I'm going to talk about something toward the end of this Parshah that Chabadniks say that's absolute halakha when it's not. Now, I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag yet, so let's get started. Something important about Moshe is that he was speaking on behalf of Elohim. Essentially, he personified Elohim because, Elohim, Jehovah, would have never allowed his soul or spirit to come in that pagan, evil country of Egypt. But his servant Moshe was blessed and anointed with a power on high to go there on behalf of Elohim, like an ambassador, a liaison. This is what a prophet of God does. He speaks, or she, in some rare cases, speaks on behalf of the Creator God, the wisdom, the warnings, the admonishments, and blessings that Elohim has to give to his people. So that's very important here. When Moshe spoke to Pharaoh, it was like Elohim speaking directly to the king of Egypt. We're beginning in chapter 10, and this Parshah is traditionally read on the 10th of Shabbat. In verse 1, then Jehovah said to Moshe, go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his courtiers. Who are these courtiers? These are advisors, like his military command structure. Like in the President of the United States, he's surrounded by the department, the Secretary of Defense, Chief of Staff, these kind of individuals, his chief advisors. This is the target audience of majority of Moshe's messaging here. And he was putting his life at risk every time he went back to the Pharaoh, because the Pharaoh was becoming more angry and more angry each time he came. But something held him back from ordering his soldiers from killing Moshe and Aaron. Probably a guardian angel was there. That everyone has a red line, and Moshe was very close to crossing that red line. So the signs and wonders were witnessed before these courtiers, these chief of staff, these admin, royalty, people, and probably the chief priests there. I would say the fortune tellers, necromancers, whoever you will call them, people that had the trusted ear of the Pharaoh. They beheld all these signs and were beginning, very close to beginning to begin doubting that the 10 primary entities, or gods, or demigods, as he would say, that Pharaoh gave credit for all of Egypt's fame and welfare and good fortune, good crops, good livestock, gold or wealth, or winning victories in Canaan or whatever. He gave these gods tribute, when the one true God, who is jealous of others committing plagiarism and robbing his glory away from him. And this is part of the name of Elohim would go forward and echoed through a series of negative consequences that brought a downfall of a great nation of Egypt. Verse 4, for if you refuse to let them go, behold, tomorrow I'm going to bring locusts into your borders. Now, I'm reading to you in English word-by-word translation from the Hebrew to give you some context. Verse 1 and 4 seem to be very significant for the first Aliyah. Now, again, Moshe was speaking on behalf of Jehovah, the Lord is God, giving Pharaoh dire warning. Now, people, men or women, have free will, right? Free will choices. This is not something that was forced on Pharaoh. Now, he had many reasons to listen to Pharaoh had many reasons to listen to Moshe's God, the unknown God of Mount Horeb and Mount Sinai, because it's just the indelible series of proofs. His nation was in ruins, or almost. So Moshe simply asked, how long will you refuse to humble yourself? Not to me, but to my God. You're one true God. Instead of these mute and dumb statues that surround your court. Pharaoh would worship anything other than the one true God of Moses. He would worship frogs. There was a god of frogs. There was a god of sheep. There was a god of the Nile. There were gods of the air, the rain and fire and everything else. And even death. He never gave tribute to the God of Moshe. Now, God only judges us when we are ignorant. But at some point, God was judging Pharaoh because he saw the series of indelible proofs, something that the necromancers and priests in Pharaoh's court, his courtiers, could not repeat. And they were believing that the finger of the God of Moses was upon them in a terrifying way.
Let my people go.
Said, let my people go. And I wonder if he was getting hoarse after saying that over and over again. Because every time that Pharaoh said, okay, I give up, you can leave, but he put conditions on which he would allow the Hebrew people to leave Goshen. You could leave, just the men would leave and go out and worship and sacrifice, or the men and women could go, not the children, or not your cattle. Just playing games. And this was irritating Moshe too, because Moshe had a job to do. He was appointed to do this, and he wanted to carry out, God's commandments the best he could humanly understand. Egypt will be attacked by a plague of locusts. That was the warning. Now, people get locusts confused with standard grasshoppers. Just like certain ants or fire ants or some certain kinds of hornets and bees and things of this nature, these locusts could swarm. And I'm talking about the tens of thousands into the millions. And these are fairly large grasshopper-like insects, some of which are actually considered kosher to eat. I have not tried one, but it's a Yemenite tradition. And the prophets of Israel over a period of time, you can read about in Tanakh, like Eliyahu, feasted on locusts and honey. But I don't want to get into that. But these were voracious insects. And in truth, locusts swarm different areas of the world today, primarily, I would say, in Africa. And they could leave land to waste very quickly. They will literally blacken the sky, and it's exactly what happened here. Now, locusts have attacked, or I'm trying to say swarmed into Egypt before, but nothing like this, what happened before the Pharaoh and this plague here, in the 8th plague. So, as soon as Moshe and Aaron left, Pharaoh's servants begged him to return. After he told them to leave and not come back, he begged them to return to alleviate the suffering of Egypt from these locusts. Okay? It's enough that they're eating all your harvest, all your grain, all your corn, anything that was a vegetable or produce, had green leaves on it, anything, all of that was being eaten. And you're thinking about the hailstorm before and everything was beaten down. There was nothing left at all, other than some of the grain that was sitting in the silos of Egypt. There was nothing left to harvest. There was no grass per se, or hay or dried grass, whatever is used for brick making. So a lot of that brick making came to an end. It really did. So, Elohim was using aspects of Pharaoh and the Egyptians' lives against them. He was weaponizing Mother Nature against him. So the gods that he bowed to and worshiped, who did not give credit to the God of the universe, who made and put the four winds in motion, who allowed the clouds before rain in their season, he never gave him credit for that. But his stone statues, his idols, had let him down. So he begged Moshe to come back and please alleviate the suffering. And Moshe and Aaron did. But as soon as they returned and made the locusts go away, God brought in a wind, brought in the locusts, and he brought another wind and took them back out of Egypt. Again, this was a historical anomaly of insect swarms that Egypt has never seen before in their history. Okay? Okay, in chapter 10, verse 12, I'm going to read this one verse here. Jehovah said to Moshe, stretch out your hand over the land of Egypt for the locusts, and they ascend over the land of Egypt, and they will eat all the vegetation of earth that the hail has left. So anything that was beaten down by the hail, there was nothing redeemable of the land. Pharaoh refused the offer and the trade-off between the locusts, the freedom of the Israelite people, and alleviating the suffering of the Egyptian people. These same courtiers were begging Pharaoh to relent. In the second aliyah, Moses was entreated by Pharaoh to stop this calamity upon Egypt. So he stretched out his hands again with his staff, and the swarm, the locusts that swept, came down. As soon as they came down and destroyed everything, Pharaoh beseeched, and he even referred to the God of Moshe for the first time, really, as he knew it, his God, to remove the locusts, and that's exactly what Moshe did after he prayed. Can you imagine, being a prophet of God and simply praying to God, and then something will miraculously change in your environment? I guess that's the difference between being righteous and not so righteous in this day. Where are the prophets today that we can rely on to understand and discern God's sweet and wonderful Torah? So Moshe prayed, and no sooner had the wind had carried the locusts back at the Red Sea, the Pharaoh changed his mind again. So as soon as the sun came out and the blackness of the swarming locusts were gone, he locked up the gates of Egypt and did not let the people go. Chapter 10 again, verse 22, Moshe stretched out his hand toward the heavens, and there was a thick darkness over the entire land of Egypt for 3 days. As I said before, none of the plagues that impacted negatively the Egyptian people impacted the Jews and Jewish settlements, encampments in the land of Goshen. God had a line between his people and those people that were rejecting his message of hope and peace. God wanted everyone in Egypt to know that the Jewish people were chosen for a purpose, and they were unique, and they were blessed, while everyone else around the Jewish people were being cursed in Egypt. Now we had this terrible darkness. Usually when you light a flame, you have oxygen in the air and you have combustion and things of this nature. You have ha'esh, you have a flame, you have fire, or kindling wood in your fireplace, that kind of thing. But not only was it incredibly dark as pitch, like midnight, like when it's new moon, and you just see the black sky per se, this is darker than that. Some people said maybe this is a form of black matter that God used as a blanket to cover all of the Egypt and block out all light. They couldn't even combust light. There was no combustible materials that would actually spark a light. They could not have a lantern that would that illuminate all the darkness and pitch. It doesn't take much of light to drive away darkness. And this is endemic of the sinful person, right, without God. God is all about light. The world's all about darkness and evil and depravity. And the light, you can imagine if you were in Egypt at this time, you could see a bright and beautiful, glorious light, almost like a break of dawn or something, or a beautiful sunset. You could see that light over the horizon in Goshen. And as soon as you left the perimeter where the last Jewish house was, or residence, or the Eruv, or whatever you want to call it, the Jewish community there was an impenetrable curtain of darkness. And this lasted for 3 days. And without light, there could not be any rebirth of vegetation that was destroyed by the fiery hailstones and the locusts. So we're talking about the ninth plague that struck Egypt. And this is a plague that frightened every Egyptian, young and old. Moshe prayed, and no sooner as the darkness came, the darkness was swept away because Pharaoh said, I'm a sinner. You are right. I'm wrong. I should humble myself before your God. Please make this darkness go away. So in plague 9, as debilitating as that darkness was, when Moshe prayed and Pharaoh relented, at least apparently, the darkness went away. Almost like a solar eclipse. You ever seen a solar eclipse, how dark it is? Well, I was envisioning something similar like that. Chapter 10, verse 24, Pharaoh summoned Moshe, go and worship the Lord your God, but your flocks and cattle you shall leave here. Of course, Moshe was incensed because he said, only our cattle have been monitored properly their entire life cycle, and we know they're clean, and we know they're spotless, and we know which animals that are worthy of our God to be sacrificed, and he refused. And Pharaoh refused too. Now, Pharaoh and the third ally sent Moshe away, and there was an angry argument in that situation. Pharaoh was furious. Moshe was angry, righteous, indignant, whatever you call it. He said, if you ever come back to my court, it'll be the last day you do, because that day you will die. And of course, Moshe agreed. He said, this is my final message and warning to you. The 10th and final plague, it will be the most terrifying plague that ever will sweep Egypt. You will not see my face again. And that's true. So parenthetically, at the time that Jehovah instructed Moshe to ask the Israelites to borrow their Egyptian neighbors jewels and silver and gold. I want to bring this out because this was something, a hint that Elohim gave Moshe at the burning bush, if you remember. He said, prepare for this. There's a reason for this. This is when God would hand out awards or rewards to the Jewish people, especially the midwives. Now, the Egyptian people were so humble, so broken down and terrified, they would open up every single secret treasure store, every box of jewelry, everything, no matter how precious it was to them, they would freely give it to the Jewish people. And, Jehovah had instructed Moshe to have the women, I would imagine, primarily to go and visit their Egyptian neighbors and simply knock on the door. I think you have something for me. And this is what happened. In chapter 11, moving into Forfalia, verse 5, we learn, and every firstborn in the land of Egypt will die. From the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sits on the throne, to the firstborn of the slave woman, who is behind the millstone, and every firstborn animal. Why is this so important? Remember during the time when Moshe was a baby, and his mother and sister were struggling to get him out of harm's way. There was an edict of the Pharaoh of that time to kill every firstborn male child in order to wipe out the Israeli threat, military threat per se. And maybe there's rumors of a Mashiach or something, maybe, I don't know. But this kind of thing that God remembered is Zolkar. He remembered that evil against the Jewish people. A lot of male children lost their lives. And now this is retribution. I want you to understand, no matter how evil Hamas is, we should not want the same evil for them, because evil will destroy us, and anger and unbridled vengeance in our own hearts and minds just will destroy us. God will judge Hamas, and he has. And God remembered the victims of the Jewish people in the time of Moshe when he was a child, and he judged Egypt severely in the 10th and final plague. The fourth Aliyah, Moshe had already delivered the final warning, in which the Pharaoh said, do not come back again because you will die. And Pharaoh even lost his firstborn son. The Egyptian slave lost, if they were firstborn, they lost their lives. And you had selectively, deliberately, individuals throughout Egypt, if they were firstborn, animal, person, child, adult, whoever it may be, they all died. They all gave up the ghost and died. And you can imagine the wailing, the crying, the fear and the terror that's sweeping out in Egypt. Now, during this time in preparing for this angel of death sweeping upon Egypt, in chapter 12, in verse 21, Moshe summoned the elders of Israel and said to them, draw forth and buy for yourselves sheep for your families and slaughter the Pesach sacrifice. And the entire fourth Aliyah was talking about essentially the Seder. And it's interesting how it brought out Rosh Chodesh was introduced the first time. And understand the Hebrews were essentially B'nai Noach. They were not Yehudim yet. They were not Israelites per se. They were still nomadic people, and they were Noahides. Just as Abraham was Noahide, and Isaac and Yaakov, they're all Noahides. They did not receive their Yehudim soul per se from Mount Sinai at this time. But they were giving enhanced laws of Noach, the first 7 laws of Noach, and they were given additional laws about understanding the importance of Rosh Chodesh, recognizing the first day of the first in the Hebrew calendar or the calendar system they were abiding by, probably Egyptian, who was pointed out, hey, this is the first of the month. Look up, look at the moon, you can tell. All this was going on when the angel of death was approaching, and the Israelites were getting ready to sacrifice a lamb for the 15th of the month of Nissan. Interestingly, the month of Nissan is not even mentioned in the Torah at all. This is something that rabbinics have came up with nomenclatures for the months. The blood of the lamb was to be smeared on the doorpost of every observant Jew. And this is a commandment for their own safety, because when the death angel, whatever that was, adversarial, maybe Gabriel, who knows, it does not say, he would pass, and this is what Passover Passover means. He sees that blood of that lamb on that doorpost, that it would pass by that home and move on. I want to point out that only a remnant of the total Hebrew population of Goshen actually survived this curse, this pestilence against the Egyptian people, because not every Jew followed the commandments of Moshe. And not every Jew survived to get to the point where they would be released from Egypt as well. Okay? And there's many examples throughout the Tanakh about how you have remnant Jews, but the majority of Jews perished because they did not listen to the prophets, did not listen to the words of God. And Jehovah said, Zokar, to remember this day, this 10th plague, how it with a great and heavy hand that Elohim freed his people, and it would be passed on to every generation for thousands of years, essentially. And the 7th day holiday of Passover, in which no leaven would be eaten or possessed. We're talking about matzah. We're talking about they didn't have time to make bread for their long journey ahead. They had to quickly roll the dough. They didn't have time to prepare, use yeast where it takes 2 hours in bread making challah, for yeast to rise, and before you can bake it. And they did not have time. The lamb was brought in to their home and inspected for kosher root per se. And once the proper lamb was selected, it was slaughtered and the blood was used on the doorpost. So in chapter 12, fifth aliyah, Moshe gathered the Israelite elders and conveyed to them Jehovah's instruction. Now, in the past, at the very beginning, when Moshe was speaking on behalf of God, not many of the Jewish people listened to him other than his Levitical home tribe. But now everyone listened to Moshe. And some of the Egyptians listened to Moshe. And some of the Egyptians and some of the foreigners actually traveled with the Hebrews when they left Egypt, journeying to the promised land. Okay? So this is very interesting in chapter 12, verse 29. It came to pass at midnight that the Lord God smote every firstborn in the land of Egypt. The witching hour, per se. You know, when Big Ben chimes, you know, you can hear, just think about that, you know. And then everyone suddenly died if they were the firstborn. Remember, the firstborn of everything belongs to God. They either to bless, to protect, or to curse. And there's something fascinating about this. Sixth aliyah, continuing about the 10th plague. Pharaoh woke and raised to Moshe and begged him to take the Israelites and leave. It does not give detail about this, but I presume in the writing of Josephus and other movies and things like that, that he lost his precious son, his firstborn son. I don't know his age or whatever, but this really hurt him very badly. He lost a good portion of his workforce. He lost his courtiers, friends, family, relation, all lost people because of the firstborn curse. So at this time, you know, the Israelites, the Hebrew people, were gathering up all their wagons and donkeys and things of this nature, their supplies, everything they would take with them. The women had already inquired of their Egyptian neighbors of their gold and silver, jewelry, rings, all these things, all the precious things were all acquired during that time. And they were ready to go at the first dawn of the morning. It's debatable exactly when they left, but I imagine not a lot of people got a lot of sleep with all that, the howling and yelling and screaming of the Egyptians around them. But as soon as the dawn of the day, I mean, they were wanting to leave. In chapter 13, Elohim is speaking. You had just seen how the firstborn perished in the 10th plague against the Egyptians because they did not fear me. Now I want you to sanctify to me, your God, the firstborn, everyone that opens a womb among the children of Israel, upon man and among animals is mine. This is a tradition through this day that the firstborn, primarily sons, receive the inheritance. And even in Gentile society, the firstborn son gets the greatest of the inheritance passed on from the father. I want to point out in the 7th aliyah a huge divergent opinion between Sephardi Jews and rabbinites. Now, Jehovah gave the Israelites several mitzvot. I'm going to list them. Number 1, all male Israelite firstborn were henceforth sanctified to Jehovah and Jehovah alone. To eat matzah on Passover, the 7 days of Parshah, beginning on the 15th of the month of Nissan. Recount and tell the story of the Exodus Passover Seder. I want to point out that the Pesach holiday is really is all about families, and it's not celebrated within the synagogue like some holidays, like Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and others. It's a family meal that we assemble together, and it's also to encourage that you will tell the story in whatever language is most understandable for you and your children. And we'd like to make Passover the focal point of our children more than anyone else in retelling this story. So all the firstborn and kosher animals and sacrifices will be brought before the Lord God, the Levitical priesthood, to be inspected for kosher root and make sure they're acceptable for sacrificial offerings. There's also talk about the firstborn of Goshen, the Jewish people. They actually will be candidates to be equivocated, no matter what tribe they were, Benjamin, Benjamin, Simon, that they would actually be part of the Levitical tribe. And lastly, okay, there is a divergent opinion between rabbinates and Cardi Jews. Rabbinate says, and I'll read this to you, they claim, and their halakha interpretation of this Torah passage in the Sefer Aliyah, chapter 13, verse 16, I'm going to read it to you. They claim that there's a mandate to don on or put on tefillin. Of course, tefillin are those boxes that you put between your eyes, the frontage here, and a box put on your arm, left or right, depending on if you're left-handed or right-handed. Well, putting on these boxes with the Torah scrolls may mean a traditional thing, may be meaningful, needful, especially if your grandfather handed it down to you. But it's something that men, through their opinions, developed and formulated that was not occurring in the Torah. So in Karaidism, we do not put on tefillin, these black boxes, we put over the frontage of our eyes and put on our arm, our forearm. Verse 16, and it shall be for a sign upon your hand, not your forearm. It says hand. The word for hand is il yadayak. Il yadayak is upon your hand. Just think about that, okay? And as a sign and a symbol between the frontage of your eyes, and this is vula tatavot ban and neak. Essentially, these are the Hebrew words that refers to this sign. Cardi Jews do not take this literally, as rabbinites do. Like, for instance, the construction of tzitzit is very detailed as far as the way the cords are wrapped in the chains and the one blue thread. But in this passage, which is a very important passage and is part of our Shema and many of our prayers, that through Zokah, remembering we will not forget the signs that God used against the Egyptian army and those people to free, with a great miracle and a great hand, the Jewish people from bitter bondage and slavery. So don't get confused when God said, do this as a sign or a symbol that you will not forget, because remember, your eyes are everything. If you can see, if you're blessed to see, and some people cannot see, they have to use Braille. But if you can see, you look into the windows of other people's eyes, right? The windows to their souls. Your hand as a sign there, you will not use this hand to murder. You will not use this hand to hurt anyone, to get into fist fights. You will not use this hand and shake on an agreement only to break your solemn vow. So this is what it's talking about. Your handshake, and they say before, between two gentlemen, your handshake shows the strength of that man's character, versus a weak handshake. A man can tell a man has a spine of iron when they receive a very strong handshake from another person in a business transaction or agreement. And when they see your eyes there, they're not shifty. They know when they look in your eyes, they can trust you. So when you say that you follow the 613 mitzvot, the 10 commandments of Moshe, that halakha, is witnessed through your deeds and your actions, what you allow yourself to see, and what you allow yourself to touch and interact with. Now, rounding up this Parshah and bringing this to an end, there is a haftarah that's very close to the context. I'm going to read you a small piece of this, okay? You can find this in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 46, verse 28. You fear not, my servant Yaakov, says Jehovah, for I am with you, for I will make a full end of the nations where I have driven you, but of you I will not make a full end. I will preserve a remnant, even though I have severely judged and punished the Jewish people throughout the ages, multiple exiles, just, Jerusalem attacked and 16 times, the city destroyed twice, 2 temples destroyed and burned to the ground. There was always a remnant. There was not a total end made to the Jewish people and their sin like other nations like the Canaanites, the Philistines, the Roman Empire, the Babylonians, Persians, all of them. They're not here as such like as they were before in ancient history. Elohim says, I will justify you justly and be fair. How many fathers do you know are truly fair when they issue punishments and admonishments to you when you were a child, And I will not completely destroy you. This is a symbol of a loving father. I can quote to you quickly Ezekiel chapter 18, verses 20 through 23. This is a salvation message in this great prophet, and how no matter who you are, where you come from, God will forgive you of your sins. He will uplift you like you've never sinned in your life if you give charity and you make amends to those people you've wronged. I hope this Parshah has been meaningful to you. I hope it has touched your heart in some way. Again, we read this passage every single the 10th of Shabbat all the time, every single year. But it's more meaningful every year because we are different as human beings. Understand that when God warns you, when he makes a promise, you better listen to Jehovah your God. It's for your own good, right? And also these signs that I just talked about, your hand and the front of your eyes, and telling the story of Pesach, we are commanded and commended by the Lord our God to tell this story over and over again, to speak of the greatness of God to your children at the dawn of the morning, when the sun is high in the sky at noon, in the evening when the sun sets. We are to say our Shema, we are to talk to our children about the great miracle that led to the Seder meal of Pesach, when God delivered the 10 final plagues to Egypt and freed the Jewish people of hundreds of years of bitter slavery. Take care. Rabbi ben-Emmett signing out. Until the next time.